know some of these guys, but I thought we'd ask Andrew, just tell us a little bit about the company that you guys have started, and what's behind that, and how's it going? It's again another, I think, amazing story of a South African company that is having kind of influencing and impacting on a global scale.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, basically we do web and video. We're building out applications and products and solutions, and then we're doing video and content. And we've been fortunate to have a big client who's really helped us go forward, which has been amazing. And we have the opportunity to employ lots of great people in church and just leverage off Pastor Phil's great leadership.
You're very nice. So you started the company. When did you guys start the company?
We're coming up to 6 years now. Would you believe it, Phil?
6 years. And it started in your garage.
Yes, I was coding in the garage. It was getting very lonely. I had a vulnerable moment with Pastor Ron, and he signed me up with a fellow coder. Marsh joined shortly after, and I think we're about 45 people now, 6 years later.
So you're not in the garage anymore. You've got your own space in Woodstock, and the company has grown significantly, employing 45 people in 6 years, and doing some pretty exciting things.
That's right.
Fantastic. And over here, Sibo, he spoke last year at Build. Sibo, tell us a little bit about where you work, and maybe just a little bit briefly of your story, where you grew up and things.
My name is Sibo. I work for a small company in South Africa called Old Mutual.
Very good. Very good.
I work in the asset management investment division, and I'm a guy who was born in a township called Kamalake in the Natal South Coast. And I remember in grade 9, my teacher, it was a geography teacher, who said, the best university in South Africa is in Cape Town. And so I decided there and then, okay, if that's the best, then I must come to this place called Cape Town. And I remember after grade 12, took a bus all the way. It took like 26 hours. We couldn't afford a plane. Got all the way down to Cape Town, and then I studied there accounting, and then eventually I started working. And so what I do is I look after the division that actually invests in global emerging markets. So we get to travel around the world, allocating billions of clients' funds in some exciting investment opportunities. And I love what I do.
Not a bad kind of position to be in if you consider where you came from.
Exactly.
And now you're dealing with billions of rand on behalf of people.
Yeah. Now I at least get on aeroplanes. And I remember the first time I ever took a flight, I was so nervous. I get on this plane, and I'm like, I've never flown before. So now I'm like, I'm not going to tell anybody, but I'm going to sit there and watch this lady next to me. And when she clips her seatbelt, I clip mine. Now I don't realize, like, you kind of have to tighten it up. So mine is like kind of loose. So the air hostess comes around and says, young man, you're not that big. And so anyway, I learned that, and then I watched the food and all of that. It was amazing, actually. Wow. And
It's fantastic. I love it. Faf is a great man and captaining South Africa in the cricket. And well loved. Obviously people know you and know what you do, but just love to ask you the question, just kind of, I suppose, to kick things off here. We've been talking today about how do we build the nation and, the responsibility that we all have in playing a part in that. You are leading a national team, which obviously there's the dynamic of all those players as individuals and their own personal lives, but then the pressure of representing your country. Tell us a little bit about what you feel, how you guys can help in sport to build the nation, and maybe what some of the challenges are with that.
Sure, is that all?
Yeah, that's it. That'll do.
First of all, my claim to fame is being neighbours with Phil Dooley. It's a lot of stuff to get through, but as a captain, I think my focus, or the focus of our team, is we always talk about we want the team to reflect what our country should be like. So we've got a lot of, obviously, different religions, cultures, backgrounds, everything is different in our team. And the how of that is obviously, there's a lot of different things, and I suppose church would be similar to that, is the way you treat people with respect, the way you rock up to try and be a serving person. And I think personally I can say that for me, that's the biggest change that I had in my leadership, is the fact that I understand what it is to be a leader, and you obviously have a great example in God, or in Jesus, the leader that he was. So for me, the best thing that happened was the fact that I gave my heart to the Lord when I was 28 or something. And after that, I started becoming a captain. I think if I was a captain before, I would have been all over the radar, not knowing what to do. So I'm very, very thankful for that. But just, as I said, in our team space, culture, for us is really, really important. And that's business or church. It's got the same input. But our culture is one of being honest with each other. And those things are sometimes tough, those conversations that you have. But as long as it comes from a good place in your heart, people want to improve. And as I said, if you want to serve the team, generally the best comes from that.
It's fantastic. I love that. I think, and I'll throw this open, but I'll just throw it back to you as well, Faf. But anyone can also have a comment here. You talk about, okay, as a leader, you've got to have honest conversations. I think when it comes to any company, any organization, and even when it comes to building a nation, at some point you've got to have. You can have critical or negative conversations, or you can have honest conversations, but the goal is a positive outcome. How do you differentiate that?
Yeah, we call it the hamburger theory. When you talk to someone, you first give them the bun, which is something positive, and then when you get to the patty in the middle, you get to the stuff that you really want to talk about. But it's important how you get that message across. So one can be honest, but sometimes being honest can be critical and a negative. But if you have the bun and you can build someone first by being a little bit positive, by saying, look, I appreciate everything you do. Let's use a cricket example. What you do into the team is great and you're offering a lot of value, but I see you adding more value in this. Then someone has got a lot more openness to call it, if you want, critique, but I don't call it critique. It's just trying to improve in whatever it is. So whether it's someone not pulling their weight in the team, start off by using a nice positive example of what he's done well in the week or in his preparation or something, and then get to, this is what I think you should be doing better. Because for me, there's a lot of value in those honest conversations, and it is tough, and it is something that I challenge myself every day within our team to try and live, because the easy option will always be to say, I'll maybe speak to him later or tomorrow, or hopefully it will get better. But my challenge for myself is to, in that moment, when I think about something like that, is to go to the guy in that moment. And I suppose it's similar for pastors or people when you feel you have to talk to someone on an airplane and God told you to go and speak to a guy. It's an uncomfortable thing. I'm not at that level yet, but I'm hoping you can give me some tips.
Yeah, I'll just try and go to sleep. I like that, and I think, difficult conversations, maybe anyone here wants to kind of add into that as far as leadership, because as I think it was Marius said, we're all leaders in this room. And, a leader is someone who's prepared to have those difficult conversations. Do you guys want to talk around how you've had to do that, or what? Yeah, Siva.
I think, to me, the way I look at it in business is one, difficult conversations are inevitable. But the key is, one, you've got to check yourself as a leader. What's your intention in the difficult conversation? And if your heart is to build, actually, then you can have a difficult conversation, because I always believe that, in whatever difficulty that the person is in or the struggle, generally they know it, and it is not your job, especially if you're going to call yourself a Christian, to destroy people or to belittle people. So it's always good to check your heart first before you go and have that difficult conversation. But I think also one thing I've learned, just to add on that, is that it's usually easier to have a difficult conversation when it's attached to a vision. So to me, it's if someone is disappointed somewhere, you first got to recount what is it that we are trying to do? What is the vision? Where are we going? Because they then can see themselves in the perspective of the greater good rather than it just being about themselves.
It's very good. Maybe just throw to Sia. Sia, I know we would often have conversations, and in some of those conversations, I would talk to you and say, hey, I see that you're a leader. And you would often say to me, I don't know if I'm a leader. I've never seen myself like that. That was often the comment. I've never seen myself like that. You've obviously now led the Stormers this year, stepped into that role as captain. You're a leader within the Springboks. What would you say to people here who struggle with feeling like they could be a leader?
Yeah, it was tough. Obviously, I had lots of conversations with you about it because I never saw myself that way because I'd never been a leader before, and a lot of people have told me that before you told me, but it was in me, but I just didn't see it and didn't know it. I didn't know how to be a leader. You just gotta accept it, and you gotta work with people who see. Like I had to stick with you because you saw something I didn't see, and I didn't have to believe it, but I just wanted to come and hear more. And then I started believing and I started singing. I think the company that you keep yourself around it is very important. Your friends that you keep around is very important. And you know, like people that speak life to you, that's what you need. And you speak life back into them, you know. And when I started working with the Stormers, and I saw there was a couple of things missing, you know, and I started speaking to Pastor. I said we needed Bible study on Tuesdays. And people started also feeling the same. You know what, yeah, you're right. People started coming. And then I started believing because you believed so much in me to be a leader and Coach Robbie Fleck that I started getting the confidence from you, taking all that positive energy out of you. And then it made me get better and stronger and stronger.
The Swedish Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, so as soon as, and then I just went with it and I learned slowly but surely and I got better and better at it. And now I have the confidence to speak in front of so many people. Wow. And my leadership is not about talking mostly, you know that. I believe in actually doing, you know. But I have to speak a little bit, but I make sure when I go in that field that I actually play like a leader. That's my first and foremost job, is to lead them by doing what I'm doing. Yeah. So I basically just tell them, if I don't say the right things, just do what I do.
It's fantastic. Mal, I'd love to hear your comments on, you know, obviously being involved in a range of different environments, from church to your speaking into the, you know, BBC, secular media, all of that. There are, you know, many different people have a definition of leadership, but I would love to hear your definition of what leadership is, because if we're going to build a nation, then, you know, we all have to take that responsibility on.
Yeah, first of all, I need to clear one thing up. I am Faf du Plessis' personal batting coach. He has offered today to become my style coach, which I clearly need. Yeah, I said this morning, and it's actually great that you asked me because I had to rush so much this morning with that definition. I was asked a long time ago by a civic leader, what is leadership in your mind? And I went away and thought about that. And I believe leadership is about, as I said, creating culture. I was an architect by training, so I understand how you create space. And leaders really create a cultural space in which people flourish and projects fly. They do that by articulating that vision for where we want to be in 5 years. I think, by the way, leaders here in business, the greatest question you can answer is not how big do I want my business to be in 5 years, but what kind of city do I want to live in 5 years from now? How can I set that in motion with what I have in my hand? I challenge church leaders with that, because too many church leaders are concerned, like business leaders are, with how big my thing is. And I think our responsibility is to build the nation. You know, so what kind of nation do I want in 10 years? How can I set that in motion? So that's the vision. Then, having had the vision, we build the strategy. My generation, Phil, of leaders, just above yours. My generation is very good at vision, but we're not historically good at strategy. And about 20 years ago, God really began to speak to me about strategy, and I went looking for strategic leaders. It's one of the reasons I like you so much is that you're very strategic. You see the future, and you work backwards to say, well, here's where we've got to go in 5 years. And having done that, we then bring the right people into the team. We make sure we've got the right people in the right positions to help that strategy. If you don't have the strategy, if you just got a vision and no strategy, it's just when you wish upon a star. It's just wishful thinking. And God is very strategic. The Bible says in the fullness of time, Christ came. In the fullness of time. The Greek term there means like an hourglass. When the sand had reached a certain point, Christ came. Yeah. God could have sent Christ in Genesis. In Genesis 3:15 is the first promise of salvation. But it doesn't happen until John 3:16. Thousands of years later, God takes his time, he builds a strategy, he's got a timing. And then we bring the right people in, and by doing that, we create environment. I don't believe leaders make things happen. They don't make culture. They facilitate. They shape. They do what you do very well, Phil, and I've watched you, even when you were young in Youth Alive Sydney, what you used to do, and probably didn't know it, was create a platform for everything else that followed you that night in those events. You are a very good culture creator before we even used that term, and you still are. So I think that's what a real leader is. Certainly not a title. And that's what people like you guys do in the sporting teams. You create culture.
It's fantastic. Nolo, what do you think the youth next generation is looking for? I know there's a responsibility on people like you to be leaders. Yeah. But what do you think? Maybe there's a shift, I don't know, from what we thought, I want to be like that. What are we looking for? What are the next generation looking for in leaders to inspire them or to learn from?
First of all, that's a difficult question, but I definitely say probably two things which are sort of happening trend-wise, at least in Africa. Is the first one is people are really moving from, people who look like the part, they're really looking for the real deal. And I know personally for me in my journey, I've had to learn that being a leading voice is not the same as leading. It's not the same thing. And I think in a really generation that's highly opinionated, we're very educated, we know what's happening, you can so quickly find yourself in a space where your voice is leading, but as a seer, when you get on the field, you're not quite the leader yet. And so I think there's a maturing process that young people are going through where they're saying, okay, cool, we love leading voices, and we have a lot of them, but now we're actually looking for genuine leadership, people who can really set the tone and set the example. And I think it challenges us, people who are seen as voices for African youth, to really start creating those spaces and to be a part of that solution. That's definitely the first thing. I think the second thing as well is we're looking for people who believe in Africa. I think we've got a lot of African leaders who, young guys especially, like, I love all these programs, international programs, and I've been on a few, but the reality is we had a culture of I needed a pat on the back from Norway or from Sweden to say you're doing a good job for us to actually continue doing what we do. And I think young African people are looking for people who aren't arrogant, but who believe enough in African people to say whether people cheer us on or not, like Nehemiah, we're going to continue building the wall. And I think that's something that African leaders need. So those are definitely two things young people are looking at and saying, cool, are you the real deal? We know you're leading voice, Nolo, but it's time to start leading on the field. And then secondly, believe in us. Yeah, that we love those guys. They're great. They've done it. But believe in us enough to really do the work and continue to do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, I would just say, I think, absolutely critical to South Africa moving forward is a belief that South Africa and Africa has great things to offer. And I'm obviously grew up in Australia, and we came out of Hillsong Church in Australia, which is fantastic. And, some of you may get the chance to go there and see what's been built and the like. But at no point do I ever think that Hillsong Church in South Africa is somehow second rate to Hillsong Church in Australia. Like, I just don't believe that. I don't think, that we're competing, although we're going to be the best. But, but I genuinely think that sometimes you can feel like, the term developing nation or third world or whatever, it actually can make you think, oh, well, we don't have to be as excellent, or we could never be as excellent, or we couldn't build a building like they've built there, or we couldn't do this like they've done. And it actually becomes a mindset. And I believe more and more, it's what you're touching on there, Nolo, is there has to be this inner belief that we've got something fantastic that is as good as anywhere in the world to offer. And whether people have caught onto it or not, at some point their eyes are going to be awakened to the brilliance of what is happening amongst some amazing people doing amazing things. And, I look out here, I see Matthew Mole, who is a phenomenal musician. If you don't have his music, you need to get his music. Far better than Ed Sheeran. And and I listen to people like Matthew and Majosi and different people who are doing amazing things, and I think these guys are as good as anyone musically around the world. And sometimes we measure it according to the likes or the this or the that, and on a global scale maybe there's not the same level of influence, but it doesn't mean the impact and the desire to do something excellent should not be there. Because it gets me frustrated, I think, more than almost anything else, when somehow we think it doesn't really matter, or it would never be as good as, or we don't have the resource, or and we make these excuses. It doesn't have to be like that. And everyone in this room, I want to encourage you in what you're doing, make it world class. Make it better than what you've seen somewhere else. And that may seem like a really difficult thing to consider, but if you consider it, you'll, I believe, find a way to do it. And it may take some time to get there. And, what we heard earlier about struggle and grit, think and dream this way, because struggle and grit will ultimately get you there and will do exceptional things. So, I just wanted to say that and touch on that.
Can I just touch on one thing on the back of that? I've been coming to South Africa 26 years. In cricket, if I'm not supporting Australia, I always support South Africa. When they're playing England, and I live in England, I am praying for South Africa. But one thing that I've noticed over the years in South Africa, and someone touched on it this morning really well, the blaming thing. And I think we have to be careful. In Australia, we have some of this too, in the cross-cultural area, where we get into a victim mentality. Even in the marketplace, we can start to believe that we can't, as Phil says, we can't do what they do in England or in Germany because, we've been victimized in the following ways. We've been held back. The problem for a Christian is victim mentality is a very bad move strategically. You cannot engage a culture that you have already declared your enemy. You cannot be a voice of hope for the future of a culture in which you feel paranoid in the present. So it's not a good move to have a victim mentality. We're not talking about whether you are legitimately or not held back at times, because some of you would have been. But as a Christian, we must do as Christ did and lay that down, lay it at the cross, say, Father, I refuse to live with this mentality, even if I have been victimized. I acknowledge that I have been held back. I'm not lying, but I don't want that to hold me back. I call it a persecution complex sometimes, and I was asked at the BBC not long ago, are Christians in Europe persecuted? And they expected me to say, well, of course we are. And I said, no, we're not. There's a cultural bias, but that's not persecution. And so I think it's important that we rise above victim mentality. South Africa's just loaded with innovation. What I'm excited about South Africa, Phil, is innovation. There's innovation in almost every industry in this country right now. Even politics here, for all of its challenges, thank God for you, for all of its challenges, there's innovators in there like you doing these exciting things. For me, that's what excites me about South Africa, is the power of innovation.
Yeah, brilliant. Let me just ask Andrew a question. You've started a business, you've been 6 years into it, you've now got a number of employees, and you're obviously wanting to expand and start to have a global impact. How has the theory of, I'm a leader running this, and the reality Have they been different, and how have you had to grow?
Well, I've been very fortunate, Phil. I think serving in church has really set me up for a win. I've learned a lot just turning up on a Sunday, leading a team, making mistakes in a safe environment. And church really gave me that confidence to step out and build a business. Not only that, but I learned the skill set serving in church that I'm doing today. So for me, it's really also, I guess, leaning on the big man. I need his help. And, you know, I love Proverbs 21. It says, good planning and hard work leads to prosperity, and hasty shortcuts leads to poverty. So I believe, you know, hard work and, you know, good planning, there's no shortcuts for that. And ultimately, I think our success we recognize is not in our skill set, but it's in our people. So we value our team, and we recognize if we're going to go forward, we have to invest in them, we have to love them, we have to nurture them, we have to lead them, we have to have those difficult conversations we're talking about. And I think just being really authentic and honest and, you know, transparent about what we're trying to achieve. And I think if we can keep the goal clear and we can communicate it, then we can go forward together. If we don't know what we're trying to achieve, we're basically running around in the dark. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's fantastic. And you touched on something there that maybe we can discuss a little bit here, but the idea that you said the people are the greatest resource. And I believe that for any organization. You know, for a church, it's not the building. You know, if a church thinks its building is its greatest resource, then that church will not continue to advance and grow, because it's never the building or the facility. If an organization thinks or a company thinks it's their product, it's not the product. It's you look at an example like Apple. You know, Apple has had a myriad of products, so it's not one product. And you look at different nations that succeed. It is always, the resource is always in the people. There are nations, many African nations, that have incredible natural resource, but are not as economically powerful as they could be, because the people have not been empowered and resourced and led well. And so we always need to understand, I believe this, that whatever it is that you're engaged in, involved in, or leading, or responsible for, it is the people are your greatest resource. So you need to build and grow great people around you in order to fulfill whatever that is that you're called to. Because great products will come from great people. It may be a bad product, but you can make it a great product. It may be a bad idea, but it will become a great idea because of the people and the culture that you create. And so understanding that principle that you're talking about there, to me, is so critical, because we think it's something else. We'll think, well, you know, we've got these natural resources and we should be this. It's always about the people's ability to get that resource out of the ground, to, you know, make good decisions with regard to that. That is always, so how do we shape that thinking within people? And Sibu, I'd like to just throw to you in regard to that. You have shaped a team within an organization that's been around. I think it's one of South Africa's oldest companies and one of its largest. And you've had to shape a team within that where there could have been a lot of complacency and the like. How have you gone about doing that?
I think for us, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, we started the unit that we are doing. And at that time, nobody thought we could actually go and invest globally, because now you're competing against the best and the brightest and the most well-resourced people globally who are educated at the Ivy League universities and stuff. So the first thing we had to do was, obviously, especially living in South Africa, is that you get a team of people who are also extremely smart. And you've then got to get into these people that actually they are as good, if not better, than everybody else. And to me, it is the people. But the people, like Mel said, it's actually about the culture. And the culture comes from the values. And I think this is, to me, where probably leadership comes from. That as a leader, about what values do you bring? Because those values then dictate the culture and then dictate how those people act and how they deliver. And so if you're a leader and you go and you create an environment where people understand they're appreciated, they understand they've got to deliver to a certain vision, they feel empowered, they feel encouraged, they feel like this is the kind of place where risk is actually permitted. You will fail, and actually in that failure, you kind of recognize, actually, we've learned a lesson. So let's get on, let's get better. And in that, the people then actually start forming a closer bond. And the people then feel empowered that actually this is the kind of culture where I feel like I belong and actually I can deliver. And that's, I think, to me, is probably how you actually start building people. And we've seen then the fruit of this, where we suddenly started generating investment returns in our world, which were world-beating. I mean, we could be compared with the best and the brightest in the world, and actually we were right up there. But it wasn't about the product. It was all about a set of people who suddenly sat there and said, actually, we can do this. And also, I mean, the other thing that made us really have a mental shift in the people was the fact that we started traveling and sitting in meetings with some people who actually we thought, wow, these guys are amazing. And we'd sit in these meetings and we'd sit there and say, no, I know that, I know that. No, I know this better than them. And again, it came from that South African mentality that sometimes it takes you going in another world to realize, wait, no, they're not more special than me. We can do this too. And that belief then is self-fulfilling.
Yeah, fantastic. Just on risk and failure, Faf, I want to talk to you about that, because a lot of us will fail, and Sia, you may want to talk about this as well, but our failures are not as public as your failures. You know, if we lose, you know, they're not going to write about it in the paper tomorrow. It's not going to be on the news tonight. We're not going to get grilled about why we failed. How have you, because it's part of succeeding is failing. And as a batsman, you know, you're going to go out there and sometimes you're just going to someone's going to bowl a brilliant delivery to you and there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. How do you mentally cope with failure and continue to believe that you can succeed?
Yeah, great question. Basically, you go through that by learning the hard way. You, as a younger cricketer or younger sportsman, you'll have your identity in cricket or performance, because it is a performance thing, as you said. So you'll do well, people will praise you, you'll feel on top of the world. You'll do badly, people will hate you, you'll feel depressed, and you go through this constant ups and downs and ups and downs. And I went through that as a younger cricketer. Then with the older you get and the grayer that you get, the more mature you get, and you understand that what you need to do is you need to treat your successes and your failures exactly the same. So I have a great day at the office and I score 100 and I come back and I do not read too much into the praise that I'm getting, because I know tomorrow or 2 days later I'm going to get abused, and from all angles. And then you've got to look at it exactly the same way. So it takes thick skin. Obviously, I would have preferred playing in the 80s when there was no Twitter, because people won't have that access to whatever they could say at you. And young cricketers or sportsmen, they struggle with it because they come into the team, especially from a domestic level, where there's no eyes on you and no one has got that reference to you, because I don't watch really what's going on domestic level. But as soon as you come to international level, if you drop a catch or you have a bad game or you lose a series or whatever, our South African people is very passionate about sport, so they let you know exactly what they think. And that's a politically correct way of saying passionately.
I like the way you say that. So diplomatic, like
Yes.
a good captain.
Wisdom.
Wisdom, man.
So as I said, you have to get your head knocked and bumped a few times to understand what it's all about. And for us, I promise you, it's nothing ever. It's about the praise or you do it because you love it. And if you don't love it anymore, you'll stop doing it.
That deserves a round of applause, because it's very real for these guys. And can I just say, if you have an opinion about cricket, there's a reason why you're not out on the field, and they are. So you're probably better off keeping it to yourself. Just protecting some of my friends. Sia, let me ask you this, because what Faf's talking about there is really where you get your value and your identity from. And it's fantastic to be celebrated in the public arena and, wow, doing great. But your value ultimately has to be deeper than that, because whether as a sportsman or in any area of life, you can't live up to the hype. None of us can. And we have real lives and families to live. And rugby will only be for a season, and cricket will only be for a season. So how have you learnt to deal with the highs and lows and gain a deeper sense of value and identity?
It's tough because I used to struggle quite a lot because I used to read a lot of social media, and obviously when I started playing, I used to determine how well I played by what the media was saying, and I had to learn it the hard way. I went through, my first year was amazing. Everybody praised me, should be a Springbok. I didn't make the Springboks, I made it the next year. And then after a while I started learning that it's, there's people that praise you are the same people that destroy you the next day. So I just, from last year when we started meeting and stuff, I started finding a different reason, because I do love rugby and I play for my family and everything, and I've just made it as my place of worship for me. It's bigger than me. I make sure when I go and play, I do, it's a talent that I'm blessed with. It's given to me by God. So I make sure every day, and I ask God to take care of me on the field and do His work through me. So now, whether I have a bad game or a good game, it doesn't matter, because I feel like I'm not in control, especially when I'm playing well. I walk off the field, I don't know how I did all that kind of stuff. And what people think of you it doesn't always make you who you are. For me, it's about the guys that I'm playing with who work with me every day, who know how I feel. They know that I don't walk on the field to give a bad performance. So they really matter to me, and that's all I focus on, their opinions, my coach's opinion, and then my family as well. And I don't read, when I'm in my match week, I will not read social media because I got a very soft heart. I take all that stuff in. So I choose to ignore it nowadays. And I play for God, and I can never disappoint Him. He always loves me at all times. So yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think for all of us, coming to a deeper sense of our value and our identity is so critical, even to being prepared to fail. Because if my identity and value is tied up in success, then I won't take risks because I don't want to fail. But risks and failure are part of growth and success, and we heard that today, and I think that's so important. Do you guys have anything to add to that? Yeah.
Just on identity, something that I think there's quite a bit of value in it that I learned from in cricket, is when you fail and fail and fail and fail and fail, and it feels like cricket is a sport where you actually fail, like you're failing a lot. I find that when your identity was my performance, so initially when I got saved, and for the first time in my life, I had to give this thing over, what was called performance. I had to give it over and say, Lord, I give you today, whatever happens, I'm going to love you, I'm going to serve you. But that's harder than it is sometimes. It's very easy to say, but it's harder to do. And as soon as that thing started making sense for me, that your performance is now a little bit out of your hands. So when you do have a bad day, you can say, well, I gave it my best, and like Seal was saying, that God loves me, tried my best, my family loves me, tomorrow I'll get another chance, and that's the same for everything. But if you don't have that, your performance will drive you so much, because your identity lies in your performance, or the person that you are, that you want to be liked by your players. You focus so much on that, or money, or whatever your identity falls into. But as soon as we took that step back and say, well, it's not in my hands anymore, it's like the pressure of your performance gets taken away from you.
It's fantastic. Well done. Well, that's pretty much all we have time for with these guys. Can we put our hands together one more time? Fantastic. And we're going to have a break now. We're going to have some tea, and we'll be back in here at 7 p.m. for a final session with Owen McManus, and finishing at 8 p.m. tonight. So thanks for being here.